Delighted to say we've got Matt Slater with us as well to talk about the Manchester United situation and the potential sale of the club. Matt, how are you getting on this evening?
I'm all right. How are you?
Yeah, good. I mean, we were talking a little bit earlier about Jim Ratcliffe and the fact that he has now publicly become the first bidder who has made people aware that he is interested in buying the club. Perhaps no great surprise. He's always said that he's a supporter of Manchester United. He's from the area. He's been previously linked with Chelsea. But it doesn't necessarily mean just because Jim Ratcliffe is the first person to say, I want to buy the club, that he's going to be the one who does so.
No, it doesn't. And I suppose it's a very different approach to the one that he took with Chelsea, where he was the last guy to say he wanted to buy the club. He came in arguably a little bit too late that time. Maybe he's learned his lesson this time. Maybe he's been smoked out by the rumours of Qatari interest or Dubai interest. But look, it's no secret that Sir Jim Ratcliffe has wanted to buy a Premier League club for some time. He's, if not the UK's richest man, he's sort of right up there. I haven't seen the most recent classification in that all-important race, but he's been right up there for some time. He's a big sports fan, big football fan. I think Man United has always been his first choice. He grew up in Oldham. He talks about being a Manchester United fan. But more recently, of course, he's talked about being a Chelsea fan as well. I think that's just because he's lived in Chelsea. So you're right. Rich guy, loves sport, made his money in sort of an interesting way that we can get into if you like. But certainly over the last few years has shown a real willingness, desire to spend some of that money on fun, sport, sailing,
cycling,
yeah, football, running, you name it.
It's a pretty wide portfolio that he has currently. I mean, I think a lot of people watching it with interest, maybe the reaction from some of the Nice fans who believed it was going to accelerate them going right towards the top of Ligue 1 and potentially challenging Paris Saint-Germain to win the title there. That's not quite transpired so far. He's been key to the Ineos cycling team, himself and Sir Dave Brailsford. So just to give us an impression, this is a guy, if he's dipping his toe into sport, has done so in a very significant way in recent years.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, so he probably goes back to Sir Ben Ainsley and the America's Cup. Now, that is the ultimate rich man's playground. I think that was about 2018. And he's just decided that he's going to try and bankroll a GB winner of the America's Cup. Now, just some people have sort of been pointing out, well, what's he achieved? He's done nothing in America's Cup. We've never won the America's Cup. So he's following on a proud tradition of noble failure there, and he's only really had one go at it, and it is ludicrously expensive, and the rules of that competition are just laughable. They're totally stacked in the favour of the champion. But anyway, he has chosen to have a crack at that, and who knows where he'll go with that. I mean, I'm not a sailing expert, but I'm led to believe he did reasonably well on his first go. Now, the cycling thing is interesting. He basically bought Team Sky, so he bought an already dominant British team. He quite likes the British bands, to be fair, not just in sport. And they've continued to do pretty well. They're not as successful as they were a few years back, but they have still won races and will continue to do so. He's bought football teams. The first one was Lausanne, actually, where he was based at the time, where Ineos' headquarters was based at the time. And they fluctuated between the top and the second tiers in Switzerland. I think they're back in the top two at the moment, but there was a relegation in there for sure. He's got them a new stadium though, and as you mentioned, Nice. So he bought Nice, I think, in 2019. I think they were they were fifth, then ninth, then fifth. But last season was good. They made the French Cup final. I mean, it's a tough nut to crack, that, isn't it? PSG, if that's your bar. So he hasn't quite achieved that. They're not doing so well this season, but it's not been bad by any stretch of the imagination. And Nice, I was talking to someone the other day about this as though it was some terrible blot on his copybook. Nice haven't won the French title since the 50s. They're not a big club. So again, I don't think there's any disgrace there. He's also bought a stake in Mercedes F1 team, serial winners. He's bought them at a time when they're not winning, but we'll see how that goes. And he sponsors the New Zealand All Blacks. So he's collecting, as you say, quite a portfolio of interesting sports teams.
Well, Manchester fans might be wondering, Matt, does that mean his focus would they be number one priority if he was to take them over then?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Just because the Premier League, I'm actually, just before you came to me, I was writing a report. I don't think I'm going to break too many embargoes here. It's the Deloitte Money League out tomorrow, so you can talk about that tomorrow. And the story is, it's been discussed for the last couple of years, the utter domination of the Premier League. So I don't want to. There is a bit of an embargo, so I can't tell you too much. But the Premier League clubs are rolling in it. Now they're spending it as fast as they can bring it in through the door as well. But it does give credence to this idea that there is a European Super League. It's called the Premier League. Now, Manchester United might not be the richest club in the Premier League, and they might not be the best club in the Premier League right now, but they have been for a very long time. They're still the biggest, most prestigious, most famous. They've still got the most fans. Yeah. If billionaire Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who was born in Oldham, gets his hands on the keys of Old Trafford, yeah, I'm pretty sure they're going to be his priority.
Well, look, they've been remarkably, the revenues have been incredible, even before we see tomorrow's figures. Looking at the Deloitte list from last year, they were in 4th place across football clubs around the world. Man City, Real Madrid and Liverpool completed the top 4. Revenues of just shy of £700 million. And that's at the time where Manchester United weren't the big dog within the Premier League or at the top of the table. And therefore, the Glazers have always been able to kind of leverage that financial muscle at their time where they've been in charge. So if Jim Ratcliffe comes in, this is a club that I won't say necessarily self-sustaining with the investment that might be needed in Old Trafford and within the squad, but it is a money-making machine that he'd be taking over here.
Oh, too right. And that's been the case for a long, long time. 20 years ago, they were streets ahead. And this is one of the disasters, the tragedy is too strong, but the indictments of the Glazer era. They took football's, one of sport's great money-making machines, and they've turned it into something not mediocre, but not as good as what they found. They were so far in front of all their English rivals. And if you go back through the Deloitte Money League lists, I think they've topped half of them, and they were sort of serial number one for most of the noughties. So ever since that kind of post-Ferguson decline, but also I think kind of complacency and neglect on the behalf of the Glazers, who of course haven't just allowed the stadium to sort of fade, the training ground as well. But I think also just their commercial deals, they're just not as good as they were. However, a little bit of love and attention and focus, and Radcliffe's got quite a good track record of breathing life into old companies. That's basically the Ineos story. It's 30 plus old petrochemical companies that he's bolted together into a conglomerate. He's good at that. So I definitely can see United, whether they regain their perch at the top of the Premier League, I don't know. Maybe they will, but I could definitely see them, hitting getting back to number one in the Money League.
It's a very difficult club to value when it comes to the eventual purchase price if the Glazers to be convinced to sell, because $5 billion is around about the figure that seems to be talked about quite a bit, and that is based on multiples of revenue. It's based on the prestige of the club, and I think a lot of people are probably using Chelsea as a little bit of a yardstick. So it'd be around about twice what Todd Bowley paid for Chelsea, with Todd Bowley also saying he would invest the best part of $2 billion over the next 10 years into the club, and he's spent an awful lot on transfers so far. You've had the Denver Broncos, who changed hands for $4.5 billion just last year. It's difficult to probably put a price onto Manchester United because they were valued, I think, back in 2018 around that $4 billion range. I think $5 billion doesn't sound that unreasonable here.
Well, it depends who you talk to. You're absolutely right. I mean, of all the reasons that you listed as to why people are coming up with sort of 5-ish, I think it's that Chelsea price. And the importance of that Chelsea price was that here was a apparently savvy American businessman saying, a Premier League club should be valued in the same way that an NFL franchise is. And we should apply a revenue multiple of 8 to 10 times. That's what NFL franchises have been going for a while. They're the gold standard. They're the best you can buy if you're a billionaire. Go buy an NFL franchise if you can. There's only 32 of them, and they don't come around very often. In fact, there's another one on the market right now, the Washington Commanders, and Jeff Bezos might buy that one. So it's that sort of level of wealth. Now Chelsea when I speak to people about what's going on right now, a lot of people think that Todd Bowley overpaid. So the Glazers, and let's not forget Liverpool, looks at that sale and went, right, there's a new benchmark here. People are valuing Premier League clubs, and the knock always on soccer, if you like, was, well, relegation, and and there isn't a salary cap, and how do we make money? Well, there's a little bit of irrational exuberance out there at the moment, because I suppose that the relegation thing isn't really an issue for these big clubs, but the constant loss making is. But what a lot of these guys are seeing, or thinking they're seeing, is just the massive upside, the global reach of soccer as opposed to North American sports, and the fact that football still isn't the number one sport in US, China, India, these giant markets, and yet is just so popular everywhere else, is growing back in North America. They're thinking about the next big leap in media rights. How do we do that? We've done really well on the sort of current model, this pay TV model we've had for the last 30 plus years. Are we going to go direct to consumer at some point? The fact that sports betting is just exploding in North America. Well, there's another potential massive upside there. And I think they just think they can do, again, always with these Americans, they always think they can do it better. And they quite like player trading as well, which is something they don't have back in their own sports. The actual, can we make money in the transfer market? So all of these things combine, I think, to make North American private equity, which is the money that's making the weather at the moment, go, yeah, Manchester United, Chelsea, Liverpool, let's price them like NFL teams. And that's where you get to your 5 billion-ish. I've spoken to various people that think anything more than 4 is nuts. That's literally a word someone used to me only this morning.
Well, I'm intrigued by the exit point for both Fenway Group and for the Glazers, because they're both effectively trying to hawk their clubs right now, because there seems to be that feeling among them, and maybe this is a hangover from the end of the European Super League project, that they feel now is the peak of the market, that there is genuinely that potential that the bubble could burst within the Premier League.
Yes and no. I think, bubble burst. Okay, well, people have been saying that for 30 years, and we're waiting for the bubble to burst. The domestic rights, the Premier League have stalled, and yet what's happened? The international rights have surpassed the domestic rights. No other league, no other sport. The NFL would dream to be able to say that, and there's definitely more upside there. So, is the bubble going to burst? I can't see it. I mean, it sounds like you've read the Money League as well. They can't see it either. Deloitte can't see it either. So it's defying many sensible people's predictions and expectations, but the bubble is not bursting. Now, are we at a top though? Are we at a sort of temporary ceiling for a bit? Maybe, and maybe this Chelsea moment, maybe it's been and gone. Maybe Chelsea, maybe that was it. And we're going to have a sort of period now of perhaps where we kind of retrench or we sort of stand still for a bit. But there's an awful lot of clubs on the market. I mean, you've mentioned, the two obvious ones. We've mentioned the two obvious ones. But Spurs are available. And there's a fair few others. Everton are available. Everyone knows that. And there's clubs for sale all over Europe. Pretty much all of them. They're all bleeding cash. So there's a lot of choice out there. And that, I think, then is the opposite of that North American situation, where you have scarcity value, genuine scarcity value. And the old adage is, we're making more billionaires, right? The number of billionaires is growing, but the number of sports teams in North America isn't. So that creates that kind of bubble effect. And the valuation of franchises in the States is just a remarkable story over the last 20 years. They've just grown and grown and grown and grown. That hasn't happened yet in European sport, but it might be happening in the Premier League. If it's going to happen anywhere, it will happen in the Premier League. So there's a lot of kind of conflicting things going on at the moment, which is why there's been an awful lot of talk about Liverpool and Manchester United, but not much action yet. So, kudos to Sir Jim Ratcliffe for actually, putting his head above the parapet. But, those clubs have been for sale for, what is it? I can't remember now. It was pre-World Cup, wasn't it? So 2-3 months, and we've got one bidder. So
that's up to the merchant bankers probably to try and get the right people with the money in front of the potential sellers, in both the case of Liverpool and Manchester United. I guess we were talking last week, Matt, about claimed and reported meetings between Qatari officials and Spurs, and maybe they could come in as a minority interest there. I'm sure it's no coincidence. Manchester United, we saw, I think it was Avram Glazer, who was in Qatar during the World Cup and potentially could have been doing some politicking there about a sale. We saw their club that went up in Davos at the time when the World Economic Forum are there. They say it's coincidental, but I thought it was interesting. It's very clear the Glazers are going to make as many people interested, I would think, in buying the club, and not just a case of Ineos being the only bidder here.
Oh, too right. I think what's quite funny about that is they appoint Rain, who did the Chelsea sale. I think they appointed another bank as well. Was it Morgan Stanley? I can't remember. I get confused because Liverpool appointed two other, Rothschilds and Goldman Sachs. So, but anyway, Manchester United definitely appointed Rain, who did the successful Chelsea takeover auction. But then Avram Glazer can't help himself. He appears to be doing his own sales process, sort of single-handedly in hotels in Doha. Yeah. But the thing about Manchester United is they're listed on the New York Stock Exchange. It's very easy to have conversations about Manchester United. They have institutional investors already. I wrote a story last week about a fund, Chicago-based fund, that made a killing off the back of the takeover announcement. They sold 3 million shares. Look, if you want to buy Manchester United and you can actually afford them, I reckon you could get them on the phone in about 10 minutes.
Prepare to have to rebuild sections of Old Trafford if you do so, and probably
or build a new one. Or build a new one next door.
Matt, they'd never allow that to happen. New Trafford surely couldn't happen. It's too much history there, so Manchester United fans will say. Even though it had to be rebuilt before, after the war, and you could argue how many bits have been rebuilt, would Manchester United fans really accept a new Trafford, even if it was a beautiful new bowl? They want to keep their history, don't they?
Did. I haven't heard a single Tottenham fan moan about White Hart Lane.
Well, look, when you can have your beer coming up through the glass and those wonderful padded seats, you very quickly forget your history as well. Matt, thanks a million for joining us on the show.
You're very welcome.
Our football coverage with thanks to Sky. Watch every live Premier League game this season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports as well.